Right, guys. The autumn's on the way, or here already. The fleece is out. Well, one of them. One of the many. This is a Gantt number. I like the Gantt stuff. Not just the shirts. These fleeces are fantastic. And I think I got these from eBay. And I've got and they're very heavy duty and they're very generous in the fit. I don't like tight clothes, Fantastic. And they're very hard wearing. I've had them for years and years now. And I wear them a lot, right the way through the winter. Anyway, it's been quite busy out here this morning. I bought the take one. This is take three, I think. But people have been making a lot of noise next door, collecting scrap. And it's like these tin sheets, and very noisy. And the bin men came, all hell let loose all at once. And then you got these big wagons going up and down, the big Soviet trucks going for the wood. Everyone's at it. Monday morning. It's not even 9 o'clock yet. Well, it's just 9. Anyway, I got some comments, and I've been thinking about like the differences and what the different factors involved in the cost of living and between the two countries. And someone pointed out, you've got to take into account the local wages, which you have. But and this is the purchasing power, and this is true. But that's only if the two people circumstances are the same, which in a lot of cases they're not. And the main one where they're probably not the same on a majority of the cases is that the home ownership outright. I mean, home ownership with a mortgage, that's not home ownership what I'm talking about. That's not home ownership, that's the opposite. Outright home ownership. Now, depending on where you look and the resources that you use, it seems to be around about 35% in the UK, right? And it's 85% in Bulgaria, and it's actually slightly higher in some of the other Balkan states. In Romania, it's 90% above, which is that's incredible, and so that would be the main factor. Because if you look at the statistic websites, I mean, I use Numbeo, which is pretty good for a lot of things, but it can't. None of these statistic sites can look at, personal circumstances and different circumstances, and which, they are very different now regarding rent and home ownership and home costs. If you've got a mortgage, now this is where they differ, and probably would be home occupancy as well. Now, I'm not sure how many people compared in Bulgaria live in households compared with how many in the UK. So it's probably about the same. But you're going to struggle if you've got high rent in the UK and there's one earner in the house. You're going to be struggling there. And not so much if you've owned a property outright here, which is what I do. The housing costs are next to nothing, They're literally next to nothing. The council tax is nothing per year. It's about £12, And it really is. I've got the bill to prove it. So that's major, especially now because the rents have hiked that much in Western Europe, especially Western Europe. Now, you don't have to be a Philadelphia lawyer to work out why that possibly is, and it's like bums on seats, isn't it? It's like all these newcomers need somewhere to live, and it's probably they're keeping it sort of a lid on it, onto where all these people are going to live and who's paying, and it's not them. So this will affect the purchasing power by a lot, because that's a major one. If you look at the Numbeo figures now, which have increased dramatically in the last 5 years, if you can remember what they were 5 years ago, the differences between the countries, and even the renters in Bulgaria, which is 15%, and then again it will depend on how many people are in the property as well, on price per person kind of thing, and they won't be paying mega high rents, right? Except perhaps in Sofia, and those people who are paying the mega high rents will be high earners, guaranteed. You won't get the bottom minimum wage people living in the high rental places, which you have in the UK, because all the rents are high now. In my opinion, anyway, I don't think there's any very, very low rents in the UK, but there are in Bulgaria, and that's where the minimum wage people may live. They may rent a room even, or share, or whatever, but they won't be living in any high rent places in cities or anywhere else. So that's the main difference between why people, the purchasing power then kind of is skewed. It goes out of the window, really, and especially with how many people occupying these places, if they're owned outright. I mean, that boosts your purchasing power by mega amounts, Especially say you've got 3 people in, say, Bulgaria in an owned outright house, right? Compared with, say, you've got 2 people in Manchester paying mega high rent. The purchasing power is probably reversed, I would say. Now, I would say that if you're frugally minded, which most Bulgarian people are. Now, here's another factor which I don't see appearing anywhere, and it's like it's kind of a cultural thing in the UK, which is LAM. That's my new statistic, living above your means factor, which I'm going to introduce into my calculations. Living above your means, and a lot of people do that in the UK, a lot more than they do here. People are a lot more conscious here and frugal, and they live within the means, and they also do a lot of other things, like things that I do here. I like buy wood 3 years ahead, partly because you have to, because you've got to dry it out, and the drier it is, the hotter it burns, and everyone knows that here, so everyone's got piles of wood, but they're paying today's prices and they're burning 3 years later. So that's another thing, and there's all sorts of things like that, little increments during the day, which people in the UK, some do, there are frugal people in the UK, but a lot of people waste a lot of money. And these are people that are complaining now because they're struggling, because they have overstretched themselves. They buy, these ridiculous expensive cars. They all tend to go and overspend on holidays, which people don't do here. I mean, these people go local, and actually you can get on a holiday here a lot closer to home. you know, because it's like a holiday destination, isn't it? You're already here. All you've got to go is into a different area, and you're on holiday. You know, you don't have to go abroad here, although people do, because they've got more money. It's to dispose of now. You know, the higher earners. You know, and these are the people who'll be living in these outright owned homes, and say you get two people on good money. You know, all of a sudden, you know, you're quite well off on a day on a you know, an overall basis, and especially if you're like frugal and you know, you don't spend stupid amounts on cars and stuff like that. And in Bulgaria and the Balkans, there's not so much stealth. You know, where you get mullered. You know, like parking in city centres and stuff like that. I mean, you do pay here now. In some towns, they're big on it. You know, you get these mayors who've like had this bright idea, and they introduce all this parking and stuff. Like Sofia's a bit of a nightmare, not because of the price of the parking, it's because of the duration. They have these ridiculous time scales, and you can only park in a zone, and you can even live there, and there's nowhere to park, and you can only park there for like 2 hours in any 24-hour period, and it's things like that, you know. But it's not that expensive, so that's you know, people will get around that anyway. Just buy these scooters. There's these electric scooters everywhere now, and they have good, very, very good public transport as well, which is another thing. If you look on the Numbeo, the price on public transport in the two countries, and all these things add up to why people are struggling, and there are a lot of stealth costs in the UK, and insurances are very high, things like that. So this is why I think that, like, you know, people aren't as stressed out here as getting through the day financially, you know, and they're not as financially stressed as people in the UK. And they're the two main things I would highlight, is the mortgage or rent costs for the majority of the population. Here it's a very small minority living in rented places, and the rents, even then, the rents aren't high. Just to repeat my theory. So, well, it's not theory, it's reality, actually. But there's all sorts of other things like water. You know, the water rates. I remember in England, they were like eyebrow raising for me, and I wasn't really struggling. And the water rates were high. You know, now you don't get that here. It's just pay as you go, and all your drinking water, it's free. There's spring water everywhere. I've got a spring here in the back garden, and which feeds the spring over the road, and that's where I go and get it, actually, over the road. I'm not directly plugged in, although it can be, and I will be when the time's right. I can have a direct plug-in to the spring in the back garden. There is one, but it's just not switched, not connected. There was a tap in the garden, but I disconnected it when I was doing all the infrastructure works and building works and I could have a tank as well, which I wouldn't use any mains water. I could have a tank which feeds the house for other uses rather than drinking as well. A storage tank or two, which I don't really have to do. Really, I don't use that much water. You know, I don't. we don't have baths here either. In Bulgaria, it's just showers and that kind of stuff. And so, and it's affordable, the water. And my bill per month is about £2, something like that, which I'm happy with that. Um, think about tanks here, you can get algae in them and all that, so I'd rather just have the water. And I found out where it was from, actually, the other week. They were doing the water supply next door, new water supply, because they're going to build a new house next door. And I asked him where's does the water come from, and it's right up near the top of the mountains. So here, straight up the valley, and keep going, and it's right up near the top of the mountain, which I would suggest then it was, and it's a spring. So I would think up there that's the aquifer water. I don't think these springs up the mountains here. I don't think it's pure runoff water. I think it's aquifer water, which is forced up because we've got a lot of thermal springs around here. So it just stands to reason that it's being pushed up, especially the thermal springs. That's beyond doubt. They're coming from underneath, pushed up by the heat underneath. So I think the ones at the top of the mountain are just push further up, and it becomes cooler, the water, and that's where the mains water comes from here. And I asked him, did he put any chemicals in it? And he kind of said, just a tiny touch. I don't know what to put in it, but it'll kill the algae and that, because they're going to store it. I know where the tanks are, actually, up the top of the valley where they store it. So you would have to put something in there probably to just, not to purify the water, but to stop algae and stuff growing in it, which is what you don't want, and microbes, which is probably, I don't drink it anyway, so so there you go. That's what I would think about the why people don't seem to be struggling, and yet we're living on the poor nations. They call them poor countries, but these are all the little factors what I've just explained. 2 of them, or 3 or 4 or 5 of them, that like how people live here, and the home ownership, which has become a big thing now, because that's major. When interest rates go up, that's a major thing. Because it doesn't affect you that much if you're an outright homeowner, and you don't have, and you're only affected then by the by the inflation, food costs, and even then people grow a lot of food here as well, and that kind of thing. I mean, I had liver with pear. It's like they have it a lot in Georgia, Tbilisi, Georgia, that Georgia, and they have liver with pear, sliced pear, like on a pear tree, that kind of pear, and just for instance, yesterday I had chicken livers, because I buy them for the dog, but I have 1 or 2 myself, because it's good to have a little bit of organ meat now and again. And I just went outside and picked up 2 pears that had fallen off the tree, and I had liver and pears, and no, that's the type of thing that, how much is 2 pears? In my case, free, nothing. And I'll only eat them when they're in season here. Well, actually, I do buy pears from time to time. So, there's all these things that, the factors in frugal living. I don't buy any spices or not spices so much as things like thyme and parsley and all that. Herbs, that's the word I was looking for. I forget English words sometimes because I very rarely speak English to other people around here, just one person. So anyway, so forget the English words sometimes. I know them in Bulgarian or Spanish. Well, you got to have a double take sometimes. So yeah, so you've got your water, you've got herbs. I don't spend any money on that, and they're not cheap. If you look at them per kilo, and I get broad stuff and I swap stuff as well with people. I swap things and I get things like I haven't bought tomatoes now for maybe 3 months because there's an abundance and people can't use them, and they give you them. And I've still got tomatoes, like volunteer tomatoes in the garden. Just go and pick one now and again. I try not to eat a lot of tomatoes because they've got lectins in them. If I'm going to have something with tomatoes, I'll use passata, which has got the liquid. Hopefully, most of the lectins taken out with the seeds and the skin. I think that's where the lectins are on tomatoes. So that's another story. So that's my take on the PP, the purchasing power, which is on paper can only be applied if both people you're comparing have exactly the same type of circumstances in both countries. Okay, cheers.